Okay, welcome everyone to another oral history interview in our series about trucking on Route 66. My name is Tom Peters, Dean of Libraries at Missouri State University in Springfield, Missouri. Today's date is Friday, March 2nd, 2018. And our special guest today for a second round of interviews is Larry Posey, who was the VP of Sales and Marketing
at Campbell 66, yes.
Campbell 66 Express. And then later on, he founded and led Nixa Trucking. And we're at the offices of Nixa Trucking just west of Springfield, Missouri this morning. So Larry, thanks again. Thanks for welcoming me back again for another round of interviews.
Well, my pleasure. This has been so interesting. What's really neat is I've come up with stuff I had forgotten myself. You know, we talked about the history of trucking and the difference that happened from, well, like Camel 66 started in the 20s. What's different in trucking then and now going down 66 highway, aka I-44?
Yeah.
One of the things I thought that would be very interesting is to see which truck lines in 1965, 1980, 1990, and now are still around, and what happened. This report right here was the one that was hard to get, but Transport Topics, the magazine, helped me, and they got it for me. One thing that is really striking, the top carrier in the United States that's no longer in business was Consolidated Freightways, CF, the red and green CF. They did $147 million. Now, and that was a lot of money in 65. I remember, boy, CF's got more money than Washington, D.C. The top truck line in 2016 only did $6.3 billion. So in those years, the top carrier went from 140 million to 6 billion.
Yeah. And who was the top carrier?
FedEx Freight. FedEx Freight. FedEx, you think of FedEx with their package, but they have a complete freight division.
Yep. And
they're the very largest. But what's interesting, of these top 50 carriers in 1965, I think only 6 of them are left.
Yeah.
Or 5. That it's I made a copy of that so you can look at it.
Am I missing Campbell 66?
Yes, in 65 we were not in the top 50. We were about 60. Now here in 1980 you will see Camel 66 right here at number 67.
Okay.
Now that was 80. Now the revenue went up. I think we got into the top, close to the top 50 or maybe 40, because this in 80 this says we did 78 million. We got to 100 million. And if you look up here, 51 Midwest Emery Freight System was 105 million, and they got into the top 50. And they died before Camel did, but we got pretty well over $100 million. So we went up, and one of the main differences was niche. It's regional. Most of these carriers, with the exception of CF, Roadway, and PI, Pacific Intermountain Express, were nationwide. Most of the rest of them were regional.
Yeah.
Like Camel.
Was Jones at number 25 and 65?
That is the Jones from Detroit.
Oh, okay.
JTL. That's Jones Motor, JMC.
Oh.
Jones Truck Line out of Springdale, Arkansas, was the same boat Camel is, because they were number 66.
Oh, okay.
And see, they were primary competitors.
Yeah. They were your primary competitor.
They were on certain lanes, yes.
Yeah.
Jones and Gordon from the Midwest, Kansas City, St. Louis, Chicago. Jones and Gordon's Transport was our primary competitors.
Yeah.
And Gordon's is on here also. But one thing that's really interesting about this 65 list that caused a lot of changes is mergers. For example, here, Denver, Chicago, DC,
Yep.
and TIME, Texas Intercity Motor Express out of Lubbock, Texas. Denver, Chicago was number 8 in size. Time was number 14 in size. They merged. Then it was DC, then it was Time DC, then it was Time deceased. They died. And there's so many things on here that you can see. What happened, in my humble opinion, Camel 66 knew how to do Kansas City to Memphis, Kansas City to New Orleans, Kansas City to Jackson, Kansas City to Atlanta. When we started going to Cleveland and Pittsburgh and out in there, we really didn't know how to do that, because generally a regional operation was a 300 to 500 mile length of haul. Mm-hmm. You pick it up today, you deliver it tomorrow. Mm-hmm. You go from Dallas to Cleveland, Ohio, that is a different operation. You got to have hubs, you got to have brake bulks, and the cold hard facts of life were you got paid to pick up the freight and deliver the freight. Your profit depended on what you did with it in the middle.
Yeah.
If you every time you handled it, it did one thing: it cost money.
Yeah.
And for example, Texas Time Freight Line was big in the Southwest. Texas Intercity Motor Express. Mm-hmm. They served, I think they even served Sagebrush junctions in Texas. I mean, they were really a good carrier.
Yeah.
DC was actually one of the first Trans-Mountain Express. Denver, Chicago, LA, that kind of stuff.
Yep.
You put them together, there's 2 different operations.
Yeah.
Time was pick it up in Dallas and deliver it in Lubbock.
Yeah.
DC was pick it up in Chicago and deliver it in LA.
Yeah. Different kind of operation.
Different operations, and very seldom did they meld.
Yeah.
The only one that really ever did it well was ABF out of Fort Smith, Arkansas. Mm-hmm. They survived 5 mergers and they're still in the top. They're still in the top 50 today. Somewhere I can find them. They changed their name. That may be why I'm trying to find them.
Yeah.
Hard to find them. But ABF is still very successful. But it isn't called ABF anymore, and I don't remember what it is. Yeah. But that's kind of what happened.
So in a way, merging was the lifeblood for growth for a trucking firm. It was also dangerous.
It was the lifeblood for growth.
Yeah.
You take Time and DC, 55, 100. When they merged, they became the 3rd largest truck line in the United States, revenue-wise.
Yeah.
Then they became the last, because they died. For example, another one that ran in this area was Chief Motor Freight. Mm-hmm. It was a regional carrier. We were all regional, niche. Kansas City, Tulsa, Oklahoma City, Dallas. Pick it up today, deliver it tomorrow. Yeah. They merged with Morrison Motor Freight. They connected in Kansas City, because then you had to have a tack point for your authority. Mm-hmm. They had to touch somewhere.
Yeah.
Back before 1980.
Yeah.
Well, all of a sudden, Chief bought Morrison. I say merged, they bought them.
Yeah.
Now, a company that had a maximum length of haul of 509 miles, now has a maximum length of haul of 1,400. Didn't match. It didn't mix for some strange reason. Mr. Campbell told me once, he said, I'll tell you, he told me several things, but this one was really strange. He said, there's one thing you can't be: all things to all people all the time. He said, he quoted an old football coach, he said, you got to dance with the one that brung you. And you got to know, he said, most of the carriers that fail because they didn't know what they wanted to be.
So that raises another question. It seems to me, just as I'm learning more about the trucking industry, is that the founders, leaders were strong individuals.
Oh.
They were, you know.
Oh.
I mean, it's like almost like the person who started the truck line, the success of the truck line really hinged on
Him.
him.
Yes, I knew, and with my relationship with Mr. Campbell, I met the majority of the regional guys.
Yeah.
I knew Kurt Crow well, the president of CF at that time. Kurt Crow, he was a Comanche Indian and brilliant. Frank Campbell, Harvey Jones with JTL, Bob Manley of Manley Transfer that ran up and down 66 Highway, Springfield, Joplin, Tulsa, Pittsburgh, Kansas. Lloyd Stith, the founder and president of Chief. Pete Case, the president and founder of TOX, Texas Oklahoma Express. That was Chief's primary competitor. I met all those guys.
Yeah.
I knew them. They were a different breed of cat.
Yeah. So to describe for us, you know, what they. I'm assuming they were brilliant, but also
Rough.
immensely practical.
Oh, yes.
You know.
They had in today's market, they would not be politically correct.
They called them as they saw them.
Just exactly.
Yeah.
And they did not mince words.
Yeah.
Not one iota. I don't, of those gentlemen I just mentioned, I think only Kurt Crow had a college education. Mr. Campbell, I think he was just out of high school.
Yeah.
Harvey Jones, he gave a lot of money to the University of Arkansas. I don't think he ever went there.
Yeah.
Pete Case, Lloyd Stith, Malcolm Gordon of Gordon's Transport. I don't think any of these guys were educated, as far as formally educated.
Yeah. School of Hard Knocks.
They went to Hard Knock State University. And Frank Campbell told me once, he said, I went to Hard Knock State and graduated, not sigma cum laude, but lordy, how come? That's the way they were. That's the way they were. They weren't like some of the presidents of these, I got you the list of today's top 100.
Yeah.
All these guys have probably got master's degrees.
Yeah.
These guys had practical degrees. That's where, but so many things they said. You get paid to pick up freight and deliver freight. What you do with it in the middle determines if you make any money.
Yeah.
That's from 1963.
Yeah. So if a trucking line failed, it was trying to be too much, trying to be everything for everybody, all routes. Was there ever what they now call succession planning, so that, you know, everybody gets older, they want to retire?
You mean golden parachutes or something?
Well, was it hard to sort of pass, if you were a strong founder, leader of a truck line, was it hard to even just, you gave it over to your son, you gave Nixa Trucking over to your son, and that
Yes.
transition thing is
that was really easy, because for me, Shane had been around trucking. He used to go to work with me when he was yay tall. Got a picture of him when he was 9 years old sitting on Frank Campbell's knee at our dinner table. So it was easy for me because he'd been in it since he could, since before he had zits, you know what I mean? He was just a little bitty kid, and he hung out with all of these people at Camel, the VPs, the road drivers, the dock work. He knew them all. So him taking over was just a matter of him getting rid of me.
Yeah.
So, but these other carriers that I named for you, Jones Truck Line did not survive the original owner, the founder. Jones Truck Line didn't survive the founder. Camel did not survive the founder. Chief did not survive the founder. Gordon's did not survive the founder. TOX did not survive the founder. Time Freight Lines did not survive the founder. As far as succession, with that kind of a track record, I don't think there was a plan, because if there was, it didn't work. Because these carriers that I just rattled off didn't really survive the founder. Yeah, after the founder got out, they lasted for a year or two. Somebody might have bought part of them, like Leeway. Bob Lee, when he got out, they sold it to Pepsi-Cola.
Yeah.
They owned Pizza Hut, Pepsi, and Leeway Motor Freight. Now they had a built-in customer, but I don't know how much a guy that develops formulas for soda pop knows about hauling freight from Cleveland to Pittsburgh, or Pittsburgh to LA. So they survived a little bit and then went down. But all of these guys that I just talked about, Malcolm McLean, they didn't survive.
How long are you going to be here? I've got to run in there and I'll be about
Well,
30 minutes.
I want to introduce you to Shane.
Sure.
Shane Posey. Tommy, how are you?
Shane, this is Dean Thomas Peters from Missouri State.
And I've been one of them Friday mornings. I can't get caught up.
Yeah.
I run up to Ryder real quick, about 30-45 minutes.
Okay, I told him you possibly wanted to talk about interns.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Because
Just give me a call sometime.
Okay.
and if you're back before we're done, you can talk to him then.
That would be awesome.
All right.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sounds good. Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Thanks for the room.
No problem.
But see, our succession was different. Now, Mr. Campbell, he had two daughters. They were beautiful and very smart, but they didn't hoof the dock, you know what I mean? I don't think Harvey Jones had any children at JTL. I think Lloyd Stith at TOX did, and some of the second generation kids didn't have their father's intensity, because these carriers I mentioned all had one thing in common. One thing. They all started broke.
Yep. Drive.
Drive is a great word, but it's a gross understatement for that generation of truckers. Drive, they didn't know anything else. It was unbelievable. I know, and the way they didn't drive their people, but when in '76, when we bought out Trans-American, basically we just bought their authority and tacked it in Kansas City and Omaha and St. Louis. Well, we had authority to a nice town in Omaha. And next thing I knew, I had some office forms in the trunk of my car, and I got transferred to Omaha, and he said, go up there and start a terminal. And he didn't want to hear a bunch of excuses, so we did. And we made money the first year. We turned a profit the very first year. And it was cool. We did well enough, I got promoted to Springfield, to the general office. But you knew these guys were so straight out. You knew what they expected. I mean, there wasn't any gray, really. You knew what they expected.
So during the era of regulation, federal regulation, how did the trucking industry sort of, was that I don't know, what was that? Was that a minor nuisance? Was it a
Oh, no.
referee kind of, you're going to play a game, you got to have a referee. And
That was the Interstate Commerce Commission,
Yeah.
the ICC.
Yeah.
In regulation, it was actual regulation. We talked about it last time, from 1936, I believe, to 1980.
Yeah.
You could go from point A to point B via these highways. Every place you went, you were authorized by the federal government with a piece of authority. And I've still got one of those somewhere, and I'll show it to you. I'll one way or another, I'll get it to you. An actual ICC certificate of
really?
authority.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I've still got camels somewhere.
Yeah.
But you had to be like Kansas City to Omaha. We had to go up, let's see, I-29 and go through Tarkio, Missouri to get to Omaha, because that was the tack point. And when we bought Texoma, Texas Motor Freight, we had to go to Dallas via Wichita Falls. Everywhere you went, you had here to there via these routes.
Oh, I see.
There were tariff bureaus, pricing. There was and honestly, the truck lines copied the railroads. Rocky Mountain was a copy of the Grand Trunk.
Yeah.
But you had the major ones was Rocky Mountain, back and forth. Rocky Mountain 25 went that way, and I think 24 went that way. That was tariff number. Middle West Motor Freight Bureau was the one we dealt with. That was the Middle West, Chicago, Dallas, kind of a circle from all the way up to the Canadian border, down through the Dakotas, Texas, Memphis, St. Louis, and that area, Middle West.
Yeah.
Then you had Southern Motor Carriers Rate Conference, which was basically where Middle West quit all the way down to Florida.
Yeah.
And you had Central States, which was cut off about Missouri, the Illinois line, Chicago, St. Louis,
To Pittsburgh.
Cleveland, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then you had Eastern Central here to the coast.
Yep.
I mean, and I'd like to say the truckers invented that, but they really didn't. You go back and look at railroads at tariff bureaus, and
same thing.
they're virtually the same thing. Railroads had it right in the first place, but your rates were all the same. I think we covered this before. If I shipped 1,000 pounds of these notebooks for you from here to Kansas City, same for you, for him. What that was done to do is protect the shipper and the consignee, because the railroads, those tariffs came about in rules because the railroads, like if we're both cattlemen in Texas and we drive our herds to Abilene, if I don't like you, I won't haul yours.
Right.
So if I've got authority to serve a point, that's why you had to be very careful about what you got authority to serve.
Yeah.
Because if you had authority to serve it, you had to serve it.
Yeah.
And back then the ICC was so powerful, they could issue a show cause. You got to come and convince us not to shut you down.
Yeah.
And also, they monitored the safety. The bumpers on a trailer, back when I started, were called ICC bumpers. They were required, and they're still there. But they monitored cargo claims and would come to your terminal and audit it, your cargo claims. Now, they didn't care if you ever paid a claim. An ICC examiner told me once when he came to Omaha and that was my, shall we say, awakening. A customer turned us in because I turned down their claim. I said it was poorly packaged. He said, okay, it probably was. But you know what? if it's poorly packaged, don't pick it up.
So you have to sort of inspect it and make sure that it's...
Yeah, because once you sign that bill of lading, then
It's yours.
it's yours. It's
And
mine.
You're responsible for it.
It's mine. I either deliver it or make you whole.
Yeah.
And the other thing they did, they didn't care if you ever paid a claim, but you had to treat every claim the same. If I turned down your shipment because of your claim because of poor packaging, and paid one to Joe Smith down the street for that's fine.
Yeah.
That everybody
You got
had
the same thing.
everybody had to be treated the same way.
Now, were the feds also almost like regulating the industry in the sense that they didn't want anybody to get too big?
They really didn't,
They didn't do it.
and they didn't want anybody to go broke.
Yeah.
The tariff bureaus, and Mr. Campbell told me this once, the tariff bureaus, the prices were designed. If you could run a truck, you could turn a nickel on the dollar profit, a 95 ratio. He told me that once over coffee. See, back then, none of these guys lost money. Carriers didn't go broke in 65. They didn't go broke till they started merging.
And the fuel prices were regulated by the feds too, right?
The fuel prices kind of came and went as they pleased, but the state taxes, the federal and state taxes were all regulated. But most of these carriers here and Camel at our terminals, we had big tanks. And the one at Kansas City, Call Transport would bring a tanker over and fill it up. We had 2 tanks, one for diesel and one for gasoline, because most of our city trucks, the city pickup and deliveries, were gasoline. And in 60, when I was night dispatcher up there, I want to say 66, Call would deliver at about 8 o'clock at night, which was on my shift, and I'd have to sign. And I remember once the price was 10.1 cents a gallon. That was the fuel, not the taxes, but that was the fuel. Yeah, diesel.
Yeah. So you had somebody who was buying fuel for you. And,
Oh yeah, yes. We had purchasing people.
yeah, and they were looking at what are the trends. Is it going to go up? Is it going to go down?
Yeah, and like, okay. For example, now all of that major purchasing was done in Springfield. It wasn't done at the terminals. But I do know one of the purchasing guys. I knew them both really well. Okay, Call Transport is 9 miles away from our terminal. All right, if we get somebody that's 40 miles away at 8.9 cents a gallon, we may be paying more because they're kind of like us. They're not going to deliver anything for free.
Yeah. So you have to sort of figure out.
Yeah, but buying equipment, that was, see, all purchasing was done here other than paper clips and crap like that, at a terminal.
Right. Yeah, so what about your fleet? I mean, how did that work? Were there advantages to having the same darn trucks so that...
There were, and who proved that forever was Herb Kelleher at Southwest Airlines.
Yeah.
You go buy a lug nut.
Yeah.
Southwest does. There's one. Every plane's the same. You go buy a tire. It fits everything.
Yeah.
Most of your carriers
Nothing to worry about.
got, as we used to say, half pregnant in the equipment. We had various kinds of tractors.
Yeah.
And that was a pain in the rear. Now, some carriers were all identical.
Yeah.
CKC, Chicago, Kansas City. So that's all they ran, Chicago, Kansas City. They had Hendricksons. They were all blue. Chief Freight Lines had auto cars that had a hood on them about as long as this room. and they were fire engine red.
Yeah.
I wish that we at Camel had done the same thing every time, but we were the first ones that had the Mercedes-Benz over-the-road truck with a V10 diesel engine in it. Was great, but there wasn't anybody that could work on it. I know one of them came to Omaha one time and had a problem, and we had to go to Lincoln to the Mercedes-Benz car dealer to get somebody that could work on it, because most of the mechanics back then didn't have metric wrenches.
Yeah.
So that was, I think Mr. Campbell and I, or everybody, kind of disagreed on that, but all the same is the way to go.
Yeah.
Leeway, every one of their trucks was painted yellow and was a flat-faced,
flat
a cab over it. The technical term is COE, cab over engine. We called them skillet faces. They were all that way. CF, all the same.
Yeah.
White Freightliners. TOX was all the same. Diamond T's, I believe. And I mean, they were even painted the same. Now, ours were painted the same, but one might be a Western Star, one might be a white, one might be a GMC.
Yeah. So Campbell never really standardized on that.
We never standardized, never did standardize the fleet. We had different kinds of tractors, and I think a lot of that had to do with some of the deals Mr. Campbell might have made.
Yeah.
It might have been worth it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
How many miles would you get out of a typical truck?
Sir?
How many miles would you get out of a typical
Well, back then, you could get about 500,000 miles out of them. And what the shop would tell you, at 250,000 miles, you needed to do a lower unit on it. That's rod and main bearings.
Yeah.
And then run it another 250. Then what Camel would do is, after their road life was used up, they'd bring them in, refurbish them, paint them, and put them in for city units.
Yeah. So do most truckers have both the over-the-road and also city units?
Yes.
But for just obvious reasons, I guess.
Yeah, because particularly the guys like Leeway and CF and the guys that run sleepers, it's so hard to pick up and deliver freight in town with a sleeper. But Camel 66 never did run sleepers that I know. I never saw one.
Because you never went to the coasts, right? You never went to the coasts.
No.
Yeah.
No. Our longest, we went as far as Pittsburgh, Buffalo, and San Antonio, Houston, around New Orleans, Mobile, Atlanta, up.
Yep.
But we were right there.
Yep.
Matter of fact, there we are. That was our. That's where we went, right there.
Yeah. So how important was, so you say, you get paid when you pick up and you get paid when you drop off, and profit or loss is based on what you do between those 2 points. Profit and loss is what you do between those 2 points.
Yeah.
Handle it as little as possible. Yes. And what about fuel efficiency and just efficiency of operation? I mean, was it all about process improvement to get it just everything? The back door, so you don't have to get out, open the doors, then back up. You just back up once. You got the
efficiency was with the doors that Mr. Campbell did. He also had air dollies on a bunch of trailers instead of. You just pull the lever.
Yep.
When they worked, they were great. The other thing about efficiencies, I know this is going to sound abrupt, but at 8 to 11 cents a gallon for diesel fuel mileage, I didn't even know what it was.
Doesn't matter. Huh?
It didn't matter.
Yeah.
I mean, I never, when I was young in the 60s, I didn't even know how many miles per gallon a truck got, and I'm not too sure anybody else did either.
Yeah, that was just kind of a non.
But, I mean, at 9 cents a gallon, what difference does it make? I mean,
Yeah.
and we were an LTL carrier, and our load average 26, 28, 29,000. Now, here it makes a huge difference.
Here at Nixa Trucking.
Yes, because you've got generally one shipment on one truck.
Yeah.
And you got to keep up with it. Of course, that's the difference in $2.50 a gallon and 9 cents.
Yeah.
But these trucks nowadays are really, really fuel efficient.
Yeah. Back in the 70s, so I don't have much history with trucking, but so this is an outsider kind of a story that I heard was there was a trucking firm out of Colorado called Monfort.
Monfort, sure.
And what I'd heard was they told their drivers, get there as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And so they used to call the left-hand lane the Monfort lane because you'd always see those Monfort
Yeah,
trucks.
that's what it is, the Monfort.
And there was
lane.
what the story I heard was they figured out that it was more lucrative to just run those trucks as fast as they could go. If you got pulled over and got a ticket, who cared? You'd get back in and you'd speed again. They were calling a lot of beef.
They hauled swinging meat a lot of times.
Yeah, so to get that meat to its destination was more important than staying within the speed limit.
They didn't care about the speed limit.
Yeah.
Chief Freight Lines, for example, that was the Monfort of of our area. Chief, back in my days, paid for 69 highway from Kansas City to Dallas. Them auto cars they had, some of them had 4x4s.
Yeah.
2 4-speed transmissions.
Yeah.
And on the flats, they'd only run about 100. And that's the way with Monfort. And they wanted to get there as fast as they could, and at 9, 20, 15 cents a gallon, so what? It burnt more.
Yeah.
But they called them both feet flat on the floor, just as hard as she'd run.
Yeah.
And they had trucks that could outrun cars.
Yeah.
Yes, sir, Monfort, and that one out of Liberal, Kansas that hauled meat too.
Yeah.
I forget the name of it.
Yeah.
It was a meat hauler.
Yeah.
And RISS, RISS, out of Kansas City. Now, I mean, they didn't haul LTL. They were not competitors for us. Everything was a truckload.
Yeah.
They didn't have freight docks. They didn't have nothing.
Right.
They picked it up here. They took it there as fast as they could get it there.
Yeah.
And when fuel was a quarter a gallon, who cares?
So for full loads, perishables, it was just watch out.
You need to get out of the Monfort lane.
Right.
Because they're going to be going about 90.
Yeah. Yeah.
And some of the flatbed haulers were kind of the same way.
Yeah. And Campbell, remind me that Campbell was more less than load and more, whatever you call it, dry, not refrigerated.
We had a few reefers.
Yeah.
I think I may have told you these camels were hand painted. They all had, some of them had a gold tooth, some of them had a frown, but the ones, some of them, Bill Boyd painted a few of them reefers with a cutaway of an igloo.
Uh-huh.
Norton was sitting in there with a fur coat. It's cold in here. But the reefers per se were very handy. They helped us land an account called Sherwin-Williams. The reefers will also throw a switch and stay warm.
Mm-hmm.
Latex paint has a problem when it's 0.
Yeah.
So, it was a marketing tool for that. I never went out and tried to get my people to get a whole lot of frozen meat or fresh meat. But occasionally, if you had a guy that shipped both, and you could make one of his problems go away, he liked you a little better.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But we did not make a living with refrigerated trailers.
Yeah, it was mainly just.
They were there as a kind of a crutch.
But you never did any flatbed stuff.
I never saw a flatbed that had a camel on it in all the years I worked there. Now, we had open tops,
Yeah.
like a piece of machinery that's that much, it had a tarp top,
Right.
but they still were trailers per se.
What about those side loads that have pretty much tarps?
Oh,
on the
curtain
side?
sides?
Yeah, curtain sides.
That, a lot of that.
Forklift would just go in and just
Yeah,
load the truck.
a lot of that came about with General Motors. We didn't buy. General Motors was one of Camel's biggest accounts. We hauled parts in, and their Canadian facility had sometimes wanted curtain sides.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, and I forgot the name of the company, but it was a company in Toronto, Ontario, that, you know, when you go to a garage, they lift your car up on this thing.
Yep.
And I forgot the name of the company. They made those, and they had to have curtain sides,
Yeah.
or you couldn't get them unloaded.
Yeah.
So we respectfully declined. It's kind of hard to spend a couple of $3 million for one account,
Yeah.
and that trailer's no good for nobody else.
Right. So better to generalize.
But yes, they were quite popular up in the Rust Belt.
Yeah. So here's another question I've always wondered about trucking, is intermodal stuff. So I was driving down to Gainesville, Missouri last weekend. I see this train go by, and it's got all these piggybacks. How does intermodal? What's the advantage of intermodal
Price
for a long haul?
for price for long haul. Yeah, like the Burlington Northern BN Santa Fe, I believe it's called.
Yeah.
Their biggest customer is JB Hunt Truck Lines.
Yeah. So what's the basic deal? You most of the way you're hauling on the back of a
Right.
train.
I pick.
That's cheap.
I pick it up here in Nixa. I take my trailer down here to where the Frisco yards used to be.
Yeah.
They take a thing and pick it up and set it on a flat car, lock it down, take it to LA, for example,
Long Beach or someplace.
pick it up again, and then a city truck goes and delivers it.
Yeah.
And the advantage of that is price.
Yeah.
The disadvantage is speed,
Time. Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
You know, it's pretty hard to get anything transshipped or switched en route if it's on a 110 car train going 80 miles an hour through New Mexico.
Right.
Basically, once it's on there, it's on there.
Right.
But it is cheaper. It's cheaper than a motor carrier truck,
Yeah.
but it's not as responsive
Yeah.
and it's not as fast.
Yeah.
But it is definitely cheaper,
Yeah.
like a lot cheaper.
Would you guys go directly into ports like down in Mobile?
Ports,
Yeah.
we try not to.
Is that just a big headache for a trucker?
It's a big headache. Camel used to go to New Orleans and Mobile and Houston.
Yeah.
It took us longer to pick up 3 shipments at the port of New Orleans than it did 10 anywhere else. Sometimes the longshoremen were having a bad hair day. With all due respect, an autographed picture of Andy Jackson would certainly suffice as a hairdresser, if you get my drift.
Right.
And I wouldn't say that we ever did that at Camel 66, but I would say if you didn't, you might be there a long, long time.
Yeah. So it was just a hassle. Right?
It was just a hassle. We don't do any, here at Nixa Trucking, Shane doesn't do any direct port stuff. None.
What about hauling for federal government or
Who?
federal government or branch of the military? Is
That's all done with what's called a government tender. Even back in '65, where, yeah, even back in 65, government freight that moved on a GBL, Government Bill of Lading,
Yeah.
was not subject to the tariff bureaus.
Oh.
You had to do a please let me be right, a Section 22 tender. You had to file that with the government.
Yeah.
And we did some of that at Camel, from Lake City up around by Independence,
East of
ammunition,
Yeah.
to New Orleans. The government stuff.
Was it good business if you could get it?
There was two schools of thought. We also did GSA, the big GSA facility in Kansas City, and all of those were done on Section 22 government tenders. Now, if you had a tender in that was the same, let's say there were five
Right.
people.
Right.
They would start with the cheapest, and if 1 and 2 were the same, the government would rotate. Like Kansas City to New Orleans, we'd get it 1 month, Gordon's would get it the next month. And then if both of us were out of business, they'd go to number 3, number 4, and number 5.
Yeah.
And you fail to pick up a couple of times, they would politely cancel your tender.
Yeah.
But I'm glad you brought that up. The government was exempt from the tariff bureaus. You could make up your own rate.
Yeah.
So they didn't care. They wanted a better deal for themselves, and they didn't care if you got one or not.
Right. Right.
But I don't guess much has changed.
Yeah. The other thing I've been wondering about, so, you've described the sort of the baseline, how it worked. But I've heard anyway, that for the railroads, there were all these exemptions and special rules. Like if you were a circus and you wanted your circus train to be hauled from St. Louis to Springfield, a different set of rules applied,
Yeah.
All these kind of exceptions and
Yes.
special deals. Did that happen in the trucking industry
Yes,
too?
it did.
Yeah.
Yes, it did. It was called an exception rating.
Yeah.
And let me tell you something about the railroads. They were so smart. They had what they called milling in transit rates. I know one of my best customers was the traffic manager at International Milling in Kansas City. And what he had to have there on a certain set delivery, he used the truck lines. And they didn't care if it got there in a week or 10 days or 2, they used the railroads. But they had milling and transit rates. You pick up wheat in Nebraska,
Yeah.
and it's going to New Orleans. Well, you stop it off in Kansas City to make flour out of it. Yeah, that was milling and transit rates.
Yeah.
The railroads had, back then, a rate clerk at a railroad terminal.
Yeah.
He was about the top dog, because
Yeah.
those rail tariffs, you think truck tariffs were hard to read, those rail tariffs was
It was a real area of expertise.
like trying to read a bowl of spaghetti.
Yeah.
I mean, they were tough.
Yeah.
But they were very smart. But yes, the truck lines had exception ratings. You had your class rates. How that worked, it started out at class 100, which was first class. Let's say it's $10 a hundredweight for a shipment from here to Tulsa of whatever, it's class 100,
Right.
which would be that telephone right there.
Yeah.
Now, nuts and bolts was class 50, which was half of class 100. You had class 50, class 55, 65, 70, 77 and a half, 85, 92, and 100.
92.
Huh?
92.
Class 90. Yeah, it was 92% of.
So what was the basic thought? Is like hauling bolts is slimmer margin for the manufacturer, pretty easy because you're not gonna, unless you tip the truck over, you're not gonna ruin any
Right.
bolts. You know,
A lot of it
they don't
went
freeze. They don't.
a lot.
They don't melt.
A lot of these rates, when they also went up to class 600,
If you had something that was
ping pong balls. The whole truckload
ping pong balls.
weighed nothing.
Yeah.
We had a customer in Kansas City, Beloved Toys, made great big teddy bears.
Yeah.
It's class 300.
Yeah.
But that's 3 times first class. But the way the bureaus, quote unquote, determined those rates was tonnage loadability. In other words, nuts and bolts, you can get 40,000 pounds of them on a trailer. Ping pong balls, you can get 65 pounds on a trailer.
Right.
Damage susceptibility,
Yeah.
compatibility with other freight, perishability, that kind of stuff. Excuse me, that wasn't class 92, it was 92 and a half. I'm sorry. But for example, candy out of Russell Stover's facility in Kansas City.
Yeah.
That was, I believe that was class 92 and a half.
Yeah.
And Sheffield Steel's nuts and bolts was 50. Bayer, their chemical division, that was class 55 or 60. It's been so long, but you had to get a rate. You had to know the origin, the destination, the commodity, and then that commodity, it was called the NMFC, National Motor Freight Classification.
Yeah.
It was out of Washington, D.C., and you looked it up. Notebooks, paper, NOI, not otherwise identified, is class 92 and a half. Now, there was the nestability, paper cups.
Yeah.
Unnested, those are class 400. Nested, I believe they're class 70.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? Nestability.
Right.
How much could you get in there?
Right.
And they went through all of that procedure before they set a rate. Then if you come out, I remember when handheld calculators come out.
Yeah.
That was in the 70s or 80s? Or,
Yeah, probably 70. Yeah. 70.
yeah, you know, the little handheld calculators.
Texas Instruments.
Ad machines,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
The NMFC wrestled around with that for so long. Some carriers embargoed them. So we will not haul handheld calculators.
Yeah.
Now that's okay to embargo them, but you got to embargo. Then with the rules, you had to embargo them all.
Yeah.
I couldn't haul yours and not haul his
Right.
because I liked you better.
Right.
But the National Motor Freight Classification wrestled that thing around a long, long time, and I think they finally come up at class 125 for them.
Yeah.
And one of the problems was theft. They seemed to walk.
Yeah.
Had the same problem with shoes. Shoes seemed to disappear in a man, a woman, and 2 children. Seriously, I tell you, I've looked at probably 10,000 cargo claims in my career. Tires, they're always 2 or 4.
Yeah. Go missing.
So,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's just the way it is. We used to haul freight from Penthouse, Meredith Publishing in Des Moines,
Oh.
that published
Penthouse Magazine.
Penthouse magazine. And what he would do, he was so smart. He'd load them up. We'd take them from their publications to their distribution point.
Yeah.
Cleveland, Atlanta, this kind of thing. He would break. I mean, they were in a stack with the tight bands around them.
Right.
The last one in, he'd cut the bands on and leave them loose.
Because he knew somebody.
Because he knew if he didn't, they wasn't going to cut them right and ruin a bunch of them.
Yeah.
And it's all the little things that the carriers did. For example, Philip Morris, Marlboro flip-top box
Yep.
out of Louisville, Kentucky.
Yeah.
trailers have one thing in common. Eventually, they're all going to leak. Water and tobacco products generally don't have a good relationship. So we worked with the vice president of Philip Morris, who made Marlboro, and we came up with a deal. I don't know if they still use it today or not, with a 50-foot bag, just like a trash bag. And he built a little fan, and they would set this bag. We'd put the bag in the truck, put the fan in it, it would blow up. And then two guys would go in there with brooms and rub the side of it to hold it up with static electricity to help hold it.
Then you load it up.
Then we'd load the Marlboros in there, close it up, tape it, put a piece of cardboard behind that, close the door. We never had a wet one since.
Wow.
I mean, it's just, you gotta, I don't know, then you had to have some kind of imagination, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know, but it worked.
Yeah.
To the tune, that was the biggest customer at one time we had east of the Mississippi River.
Really?
Yeah.
You ever did tanker trucks?
No, I don't know anything about them other than the fact if the tankers are not properly baffled inside of that tank, when you come up and stop, the liquid inside keeps going.
Yep.
Now that's what I know about tankers.
Yeah. That's a whole different,
That's a whole different cat.
Yeah.
I mean, them guys are a different breed. I mean, not that they're bad, but they got different problems.
It's just a different business.
Yes.
And whether it's food grade, liquid, or
yes, about the only experience I had with a tanker is we one time put diesel in the gasoline, and the gasoline truck smoked pretty bad. Now, that would have been a crisis if it had been the other way.
Yeah, right.
Because we had there's all kinds of truck stories, but we had a hostler. That's the guy that jockeys them around in the yard and hooks them up and gets them ready to go, called a hostler. They also fuel them. Well, he put a little too much gasoline in a Mack, and the road driver said, man, she'd run about 90 miles an hour until she melted. Oh, goodness.
Those things happen,
There's so many trucking stories from Camel. It's just, I mean, I couldn't live long enough to tell you them all.
Yeah. Two other things I've been wondering about is, one is road construction. So, seems to me back in the 70s, a road construction project was more disruptive than they are today.
Yes, it was more disruptive.
For a trucking firm, if you knew that I-70 was going to be under construction this coming summer, would you reroute?
Yes, like when I-44 was screwed up between Tulsa and Joplin, we just go down 60.
Yeah. So construction was just, you worked around it.
It was.
You didn't want to spend time at a dead stop.
No, it was just like a hangnail.
Yeah.
You need to either bite it off or just sit there and watch it. You got the people that shift it want it.
Yeah.
And the people that are down there waiting for it need it.
Yeah.
So they don't care about road construction. So it takes you longer. Well,
what you do.
That's what you do. That's what you do. It's no different than an airplane when an airport's closed because it's got 5 inches of ice on it.
Yeah.
That's just the way it is.
Yeah. So what about bad weather?
Bad weather. That was always a problem. And a lot back in the 60s and 70s, and even before, a lot of it you had to depend on your driver's integrity. I'm sitting in an office in Kansas City as a dispatcher and scheduler.
Right.
A guy tells me it's too bad at Big Cabin, Oklahoma to make it to Dallas. I was always one that believed him. If you don't, if you don't think you can make it, don't. And I had the philosophy, if I make you go on and you turn that over and wreck the truck and tear all the freight up, we haven't gained anything.
Right.
Okay? Had you rather the freight be upside down beside 69 highway or sitting at the Big Chief truck stop in Big Cabin until it's safe to go?
Yeah.
And I can't make that decision 200 miles away.
Right. You really had to trust your drivers.
Yes, you really do.
Yeah. You mentioned this last time, but I forget. How many accidents did you have? Would you have?
Oh, Camel, we didn't have many.
So really, accidents weren't a major part of it.
There was just, where is our safety? There you go, 10. We got the percentage per Camels. In 1983, we had 2.270 accidents per 100,000 miles. That was compared to a national average of 12.
0.270. So basically,
100,000 miles, we would have a quarter of a wreck.
Yeah. So, but you had like one wreck for every 400,000.
Yeah,
miles.
basically is what it was. And the national average, I remember when we compiled this, was 12.
It was 12. So you were much better than the average.
Yeah. And we didn't run in the mountains either.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
We had some hills out toward Pennsylvania, but we didn't.
And I imagine, driving on the East Coast is a different kettle of fish.
Well, we did. You've been to New York City? All right.
Yeah.
Try a 53-foot trailer and a 29 or 26-foot tractor.
Yeah.
And New York City is a garden spot compared to Philadelphia and Pittsburgh and Buffalo. New York City is like I-44 compared to those places.
Yeah.
And parts of St. Louis isn't any better.
Yeah. If you did have damaged freight, how would you make that whole?
Okay, that's called cargo claims. And back then, there was a form. It was called I should have brought that. I've still got one. Standard form for presentation of loss or damage claim. We deliver it to you. You got 5 boxes. One of them is in about 6 pieces.
Yeah.
Okay, you put on there what it is, who shipped it, blah, blah, blah. You know, the normal information.
Right.
And then you specifically lay out what is damaged.
Yeah.
And you also attach part of the required documents was your invoice from what you paid for it.
Yeah.
We didn't have a cargo claim. We didn't have to pay you a profit. We had to make you whole, and that was restore what we broke.
Yeah.
So you couldn't. A claim file required that the freight charges be paid in full. In other words, your $100 freight bill, you got a $60 claim.
Yeah.
Broken glass.
Yeah.
You can't just pay us $40 and say go away. That was a crime.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, well, it still is, just nobody enforces it, which I want to tell you about in a minute. But once we got a cargo claim from you, we had to acknowledge it immediately. We have to advise you in writing then, we have received your cargo claim. It has been assigned the following number. It will be investigated. Then, within 30 days, we had to bring that to a conclusion or tell you why we didn't. Mm-hmm. And a conclusion was not paying it in full. A conclusion was pay in full or pay in part or decline. Mm-hmm. In other words, one of the prime examples, great big rolls of newsprint?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if a trailer leaked, which they all did sooner or later, and that much of it was wet, we didn't have to buy the whole roll.
Right.
Just pay you, or a roll of cable.
Right.
We just had to buy what we tore up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you either pay it, you decline it, or you offer a compromise. But you had to do that within 30 days.
Yeah.
But that was the way it worked.
Back when I was growing up, there were, I guess they were called salvage companies. That,
Sure.
That would, so let's say a tired tractor trailer,
Sure.
jackknifes on the ice.
Yeah.
And goes into the ditch and rolls.
There's one in Joplin called derailed commodities.
Yeah. And I guess their basic business was they'd come and they'd clean up the mess. And then whatever they could, and somehow they would, on the spot, they'd say, I'll pay you X number of dollars for this mess here on the side of the road. Mm-hmm. And then they turn around and salvage some of that. And then they have a outlet store.
Yes.
You'd think, you'd go in and you might find some stuff that had smoke damage or dents and bumps on a
pork and beans in a dented can.
In a dented can, and there were businesses. That's what they do. They were salvage companies.
Sure, we had our own. We had our own at Campbell.
Campbell had their own salvage.
Yeah, we had a salvage store back in the back of the lot. A guy named Bill Pitchford, Pitchford, ran it. Yeah. And once we tear it up and buy it, it's ours. We get it.
If you get any value out of it, it's.
And like we had a TV. We had a TV, had a busted leg. Yeah. Well, we bought it, brought it in. Bill put a new leg on it, set it up there, and sold it. Yeah. So everything we could, we sold.
Yeah, but you did it in house. So was that kind of common practice to have for a large firm to have their own salvage operation? Or?
I didn't know of too many companies that had as big a salvage as we did. And at each terminal, you had what was called the 1,000 bay. That was where your local salvage went. I mean, if damaged and refused, whatever. Yeah. And then every 10 days or 2 weeks, if we had a truck going to Springfield with room, we'd put it on there and ship it deadhead down to the salvage shop. Yeah. And then Bill could throw it away, or he might sell it in a bulk, but people would come in and buy groceries there.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, and there's one in Nixa, I think. You never on the right hand side of 160.
Oh yeah.
That back in there by Big Old Tire. I think that's a derailed freight.
Salvage.
Yeah, yeah.
Was it bigger in the railroad side of things than trucking side?
Only when a train derails, there's a lot more salvage than when the truck turns over. Yeah, but the salvage, that was...
so those are still around, huh?
Oh, yeah, and like I say, once we pay you our claim, it's ours. Yeah. And if you won't let us have it, we don't have to pay you.
Yeah, yeah, okay.
And, you had to be careful. You had to really have your drivers. You had constant training. And let me tell you why. We got a shipment going over here to, let's say, Sam's Club. Mm-hmm. We got 1,000 pounds, 60 boxes. Yeah. We got 59. What's short? The driver writes one short on the bill. We are at their mercy.
Yeah, what is it?
What's short? Is it a case of wristwatches? Or is it a case of peanut butter? Yeah. So because once that notation's there, I'm on the hook as a carrier. Yeah. And like we used to do business with Gerber in Fort Smith. We had a notation on a bill once, and I'll never forget this if I live to be 100. One box rattles. Yeah. Well, no kidding. It's a box of Gerber baby rattles. It should rattle. Oh. You have to, and it was an ongoing thing. Yeah. What is short? Yeah. What is missing? And if you just say one box, one carton short, guess what? That just became Rolex watches. Yep.
They're going to pick the most expensive thing out of those 60
So
boxes.
you got to know what you didn't get there.
Yeah, yeah.
It was really exciting. Now that's not a big issue, cargo claims. A lot of your freight comes from 3PLs, which is brokers.
Yeah.
They just deduct it from your freight bill and say, sue us.
Yeah.
Which is, and I wanted to tell you about that. When deregulation came in July of 1980, and the ICC was sunset in 95, I think. Don't make me sign that. Too much diesel fumes. But you had the section of motor carrier rules, regulations, cargo claims, loading, unloading, detention, everything was by rule. They canceled the ICC. Those rules are still on the book. There's just no one to enforce them. Now, the DOT, FMC, SA, Federal Highway Motor Carrier Safety Department of Transportation, was supposed, when the ICC died, was supposed to take this over. No sale. They don't even know what it is. I've talked to them agents when we get audited. All they want to do is look at hours of service, vehicle safety, because that's politically correct.
Yeah.
That makes it. And you see another huge change. Those laws are still on the books. You ever heard the term lumper? Okay. You ever heard of Associated Wholesale Grocers? You ever heard of McLean Wholesale Foods right over here? Every wholesale grocer company in the world has people that lurk around, and they're called lumpers. They unload the trailer.
Oh, yeah.
Most of them don't have green cards. That's none of my business, but you got to pay them. What happens is, and this is on the book, this is a law. Nobody cares, but it is. We go to Van Camp's Pork and Beans, and get 24 skids shrink wrapped of Van Camp Pork and Beans. We bring it to you. That's all we're obliged to do. We pick up 24 skids, we deliver 24 skids. Now, if that skid tie is not the way that warehouse wants it, they now make the carriers fix it or pay a lumper to do it.
Oh.
We have to pick up the freight in the same manner or deliver the freight in the same manner we deliver it.
Oh, I see.
Now, the reason I'm so familiar with that is I found that out the hard way. We picked up in Cincinnati, Ohio. I was the terminal manager in Omaha. They picked up 3,000 cases of little Duncan Hines cake mixes.
Yeah.
3,000.
Yeah.
But they picked them up on the floor. They weren't skidded.
They weren't skids, yeah.
I raised all kinds of hell, and the ICC guy told me, he said, you picked it up that way, you deliver it that way. So you have to, all we're obliged to do, if we could pick up 24 skids that have 1,000 cases of Van Camp's Pork and Beans, you don't sign for 1,000, you sign for 24. And that's the law.
Yeah.
But again, the DOT now doesn't know how to do that. And CFR 249, I should have brought that too. I've got a copy of the regulation. It's against the law, and if they want to, they can fine the guy that does it $10,000 per occurrence to force coerce or intimidate a carrier into paying an outside party to unload his trailer at your facility. And the big lawsuit, now I've still got that, it's about that thick, with a wholesale grocer company up in Michigan. They got fined about $9 million.
Really?
Yeah, but all these lumpers are bad news. I wrote to the people and told them, we're missing revenue. You don't think these lumpers that get cash, you don't think they turn that in on their income tax, do you? Well, yes, they do, I'm sure.
That's right.
Particularly if they're not even citizens.
That's their responsibility, yeah.
Yeah, but the government's losing money.
Yeah.
Because not one of them's paying taxes, and I'll bet you there's 1 million of them.
Yeah. Still prevalent, huh?
Why? They're like vultures out there at AG.
Yeah. Another question I had is for in-town deliveries. I know when I was in the wholesale food business, you know, how you loaded the truck was kind of important. And it wasn't just, you know, it was pretty nuanced because you have to say, well, okay, we'll probably get to this restaurant between 11 and 1. They won't even let us unload, you know. So you gotta think about how's this load going to get off at 20 different stops during the day in a way that's very efficient, both in terms of where you're going, traffic, what you can do, when you can unload, what's the ideal time to show up at this place.
That was a really kind of a plum job back then. City dispatcher.
Yeah.
You had road dispatch, which I did, but
the city dispatcher.
City dispatch, and I'll tell you how they did it too. It was the neatest thing you ever saw. They had to know every alleyway. Like the best one I ever saw is, he's still alive, I see, remember one, Dwayne McKinney in Oklahoma City. He knows every alley that there is in that town.
Yeah.
And you load your trucks where that comes from here back then. Now everything is computerized and it's scanned and it pops up and tells you. But the way if you're opening a new terminal and you don't have somebody that knows every alleyway, you do what's called a grid board. You take a map of the city.
Yeah.
And you grid it off in 1 by 2 inch squares or 2 by 2 squares.
Right.
And then you have a dispatch box that has got the same number of squares, ABC 1, 2, 3. And you have cards for each of your customers. When somebody takes a pickup, if it's a new customer, you write their name, address, phone number, hours, etc., and then you look them up and you get the grid. So when the city dispatcher sets down, he gets a card for a pickup, B11. Goes in B11. Right at the top of that group, B, you have the truck number and a thing that moves. And as he picks them up, you just move him.
Yeah.
And you can take a grid board and never be in Seattle in your life, grid the thing out and do city dispatch.
Do pretty well. Yeah.
And the grid board in Kansas City was about as long as this table and went up at an angle probably 3 or 4 feet, and there was 2 full-time city dispatchers in there all the time. And that was nothing but, that wasn't taking the pickups.
Yeah.
That was doing it. But isn't that unique the way they did it?
Yeah.
And the old guys figured that out.
Yeah. Pre-computers.
Huh? Yes.
Pre-computers, yeah.
Oh yeah, we had one computer at Camel 66 and it took up the whole basement. It had to be hermetically sealed, I think, climate controlled, temperature, humidity, and that big mainframe they had was about half the size of this room.
Yeah.
And now Shane can do more with that thing on his desk than we could.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna have to wrap up. I've got another appointment. I've got to get to,
I'm sorry I got long-winded.
No, that's good. That's all good.
I love this stuff.
And
now here, I want you to take this with you. This is a scan of the top 100 now.
All right.
who owns them, what they do, so
Right.
forth and so on.
Right.
So you can see, this is 2017.
Yep.
This is 1980
Uh-huh.
to 1990. And this is 1965. And you know, it's not that you want to make a life out of knowing it, but it's nice to, when you're talking about history down
Yeah.
this highway, it's
Yeah.
kind of nice, it's kind of cool. Here, I brought
Yeah.
you a
Well,
note.
thanks. Well, thanks.
It's kind of cool to see where we were.
Yeah.
You can't understand where we are till you understand where we came from.
Yeah. You know, and the farther we get away from it, it's almost like.
Well, my generation's dying out.
Yeah, I mean, it's for younger generations, it's almost unimaginable.
Well-
Especially the ones that are born digital. They never have known a life without.
Yeah, yeah. Shane said once, my dad's the only living human that can run a truck line with a yellow legal pad and a dispatch board.
Well,
And
thanks again.
he said once, I'm the last living human that knows how to city dispatch with a grid board.
Larry Posey, we've been speaking with Larry Posey today. So thanks again very much.
Oh, my pleasure.
All great information.
My pleasure.